The frozen forest had never been a place for wandering children. Yet on that brutal winter morning, a small girl moved between the towering pines, her breath shivering in the frigid air. She wasn't exploring for fun, nor was she on some innocent adventure. She was following a sound, faint, broken, and full of pain, carried through the still white silence. A whimper, then another. She stepped deeper into the woods, brushing the frost from her eyelashes, her heartbeat quickening without understanding why. With every step, the world grew quieter, as though the forest itself were holding its breath. And then she froze. Her scream never left her throat. Suspended against the trees, bound tightly with thick rope, were 15 German shepherds. They hung upright, their legs pinned, their paws barely scraping the snow. Their eyes, wide, glassy, terrified, followed her as she stood in shock. They weren't dead, but they were close. Her tiny hands trembled as she stepped closer. "It's okay. I'll help you," she whispered. She had no idea the truth behind those animals would shake every rescuer who later arrived. Before we go on, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me, what country are you watching from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. The winter woods lay silent under a thick blanket of snow that softened every sound. Slow, lazy flakes drifted from the sky, landing on the shoulders of a little girl in a pink winter dress as she wandered between the towering trunks. Her small boots pressed delicate prints in the snow, each step cautious, guided by something she couldn't quite name. She shouldn't have been out here alone, but she'd heard something, a faint, trembling cry riding on the cold wind. She stopped, eyes wide, her breath clouding in front of her face. There it was again, weak, shaky, almost like crying. Not human, but close. "Hello?" she called softly, her voice quivering. No answer, just the sound again, louder now. She moved toward it, weaving between the frost-covered trees. The deeper she went, the colder the air became, almost as if the forest wanted her to turn back. But curiosity and something deeper pulled her forward. That's when she spotted them. Large footprints, many of them, leading toward a clearing where the cries seemed to echo from every direction. Her heart pounded. The wind went still. Something was waiting ahead, something she never should have seen. She stepped into the clearing, and the breath punched out of her lungs. Her fists tightened. Tears pricked her eyes, because there, spanning the entire clearing, stood the impossible. 15 German shepherds tied upright against the trees, massive bodies bound so tightly the ropes sank into their fur. Some shook violently from the cold, their paws dangling helplessly. Others made small, strangled whimpers that vanished into the frozen air. They were alive, barely. Their ears twitched as they noticed her, eyes shining with fear and pleading silently for help. The girl crept closer. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here." One dog tried to bark, but only a thin rasp escaped. Another struggled weakly against the ropes, sending snow cascading from the branches overhead. "Who did this?" she murmured. "Why would anyone do this?" A cold gust swept across the clearing, making the ropes creak. Tears welled in her eyes. She had to get help fast. She turned and ran, stumbling through the snow as she shouted for help. Her voice echoed between the trees until a distant shout finally answered her. Moments later, 2 hikers charged toward her, alarmed and out of breath. "Are you hurt?" one asked. She shook her head hard and pointed behind her. "Dogs. So many dogs. Tied to the trees." The men exchanged confused looks until they reached the clearing, their faces drained of color. "Call 911. Now." Within minutes, emergency vehicles swarmed the forest entrance, sirens slicing through the cold air. Officers, K9 handlers, and animal control teams followed the girl into the woods. And when they reached the clearing, even veteran officers stopped in their tracks. "Who could do this?" one whispered. Another officer examined a rope. "These knots, they're deliberate, precise." The dogs hadn't been bound at random. They were positioned methodically, forced upright, unable to sit or lie down. A K9 handler touched a trembling shepherd gently. They've been here for hours, maybe longer. As rescuers cut through the ropes, several dogs collapsed onto the snow, legs too numb to support them. Yet many of them looked past the officers, toward the girl, as if they understood she was the one who had saved them. While the dogs were being freed, Officer Daniels, a seasoned K-9 handler, scanned the surroundings. Something about the scene felt wrong, too planned, too organized. That's when he spotted something half-buried in the snow. Large boot prints. Deep ones. Whoever had been here wasn't small, and hadn't been in a hurry. Next, he noticed drag marks. Long trails where heavy ropes had been pulled. The girl tugged on his sleeve. "I saw someone," she whispered. Daniels crouched. "What did you see, sweetheart?" She pointed toward a cluster of trees. "Before I found the doggies, there was a tall man. He had a big bag. I thought he was camping." Daniel's pulse quickened. He walked toward the trees, then stopped cold. Strange carvings marked the bark. Symbols, circles, lines, like coded directions or warnings. "Sir," an officer called, "you need to look at this." A torn scrap of fabric lay on a stump, covered in fibers identical to the ropes binding the dogs. Nearby, tire tracks curved deeper into the woods. Someone had brought the dogs here and intended to return. Daniels knelt beside the tracks, the cold digging into his skin. "These aren't from a regular car," he muttered. "Heavy vehicle, probably a van." Behind him, the rescued shepherds huddled together, shivering, staring anxiously toward the deeper woods waiting. Then the radio crackled. "Daniels, you'll want to hear this," a detective said. "The rope matches materials used in illegal training rings." Daniel's breath hitched. Not fighting rings, not smuggling, something worse. He remembered the symbols carved into the trees, markers used by underground groups to identify drop zones. Suddenly, everything clicked. Someone had been collecting German shepherds, strong, trainable breeds, and leaving them here temporarily. They weren't meant to die. They were being staged, prepared, ready for illegal military-style trafficking, sold in secret, trained for violent operations, shipped overseas. They weren't tied to suffer. They were tied to wait, for a buyer. Daniels stared at the 15 trembling dogs, dread tightening his chest. The little girl hadn't just found animals in danger. She had stumbled onto a criminal operation, and the people behind it were still out there. Rescuers wrapped the dogs in warm blankets, their cries fading into soft, relieved sighs. Some of the shepherds pressed gently against the little girl, nuzzling her with gratitude. She giggled through her tears, brushing snowflakes from their fur. Officer Daniels approached and knelt beside her. "What you did today was extraordinary," he said gently. "Even grown-ups wouldn't have had the courage to do what you did." She lowered her gaze shyly. "They needed me," she murmured. Her parents arrived moments later, racing through the snow and pulling her into their arms, overwhelmed with relief. Officers watched with admiration. This small child had saved 15 lives simply because she listened. Soon the shepherds were loaded into warm transport vans, on their way to vets and shelters where they would finally be safe. Reporters crowded the scene, camera lights flashing, but the girl held tightly to Daniel's hand. He smiled. "Those dogs are alive because of you. You're their little hero." She glanced back at the shepherds, her eyes shining. "No," she whispered. "They're mine." And in that frozen forest, a child's courage unraveled a hidden criminal network and saved 15 souls.